So, good morning, everybody. My name is Trudy, and I am the founder of InsightLA, and very happy to be here with you today, speaking from the unceded lands of the indigenous people, the tribes called Tongva, Kish, and Chumash for this sort of greater metropolitan area. And I've spoken about the importance of ancestors, the indigenous ancestors who lived on, took care of, and loved this land before we were ever here. Our personal ancestors, who, however we may feel about the closest ones, they did give each one of us the gift of life. And, the ancestors that go way, way, way back to all beings, all creatures in existence. So, what is this? Oh, okay. Thank you, Sherry. um, yeah, so today I wanted to speak with you about some of the classical teachings because I'm always teaching from them, but I don't name them explicitly. And then it seems as though you won't feel you've ever really heard them. So I'd like to begin the year with the core teachings of the Buddha and how they relate to our lives today. And that this will be going on for a number of weeks, maybe a couple of months, because I want us to look at the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, and I think it's going to be fun to come back to the basics. And for some of you, you may have been on the mindfulness path and not really heard these teachings, or you may be a Zen student where these teachings are not made so explicit. So whatever you are, whoever you are, I think we'll have a good time. We'll have a good time with them. So for those of you, is anybody new to InsightLA today? Let me look. And for those of you who have your cameras off, okay, I can't see you if you raised your hand, obviously, but it really is fine to leave your camera off. I like to see you, but I have a full screen of people I can see, and so it's fine to have your camera off if that's more comfortable for you. So,
Anita said she was new.
oh, okay. Welcome, Anita. Thank you. Thank you. Um, yeah, thanks for letting me know. And I will just tell you, Anita, that what we do is the morning is sort of divided into rough thirds where we're going to meditate for about a half an hour, then have some teachings, and then have a chance for some dialogue or conversation together. So we begin with the meditation, and so I want to invite all of you to make yourselves comfortable to find oh, and Beth is new too. Welcome. That's so exciting. um, uh, yeah, whatever frame your body wants to be in and can be relatively quiet in. We've just discovered over time of meditating that keeping the body still is actually a way of helping the mind calm down. So it's a pleasure actually to sit still because it's not a rigid kind of sitting still. It's a more relaxed kind of quiet of the expression of not needing to go somewhere else and of being willing to just sit with ourselves and our experience. So closing your eyes if you're comfortable doing that, or lowering your gaze. It's a kind of signal to your organism that you're going inside, that we're looking within, that we're not looking outside of ourselves for this period of time, for the wisdom and compassion that reside in our own hearts. So taking a deep, intentionally deep breath in and releasing. And once again, breathing in the pleasure of just being here in this moment. And releasing any tension or tightness in the body. And one more time. And so this morning I'd like to lead a meditation. I do some guidance and plenty of silence too, but this morning I'd like to lead a meditation that is a loving kindness meditation, but from an unusual perspective. It's about the loving kindness or the love of our breath for us, the way in which the breath is a loving companion to our life. So it's not having to muster or generate any feelings of love or kindness. The practice today is to simply shift that body back a wee bit, maybe moving your body back about a half inch or an inch. If you're lying down, just connecting with the next layer of relaxing into the ground, the floor, wherever you're lying down. And being in this posture of receptivity, of receiving the moment, of receiving the breath. And when the mind wanders away and the attention goes, skipping off into the future or turning around to the past, just coming back to appreciate this flow that is always here, this flow of the breath. And you don't have to focus on the breath in any way that might make you uncomfortable. We're not trying to pin the attention onto the breath as an anchor here, but simply to appreciate the movement of the breath. It's a natural, unforced movement in its own rhythm that doesn't ever stop as long as we're alive. And usually we think of stability or focus as about being like holding on to or pinning something that doesn't move. But here in this meditation, stability means trusting this reliable flow of breath. Trusting that after the exhalation, there will be an inhalation. And trusting that after breathing in, you will breathe out. Really trusting the process, the changing process, the simple changes of breathing. In breath, out breath. Almost massaging the body with the movements associated with the breath. Emptying, opening, refreshing. All this can be felt when the attention isn't fixated on one point. And just being here, sitting together, breathing. There can be a sense of safeness, of deep safety or security, of being held by something you can trust, being held by something that carries you moment by moment, breath by breath. And that sense of deep safety or safeness, it doesn't come from the conditions or circumstances externally of your life. It comes from this sense of trusting the breath and not having to make it happen or create it, but just relaxing into it. It's a great freedom. And this is what carries and holds you so softly and tenderly. This sense of being safe and loved by the breath that is always here. And as you allow your body to relax, to release tension as you breathe out, allowing the body to take its time to breathe in, trusting that it will. Taking your time, pausing, opening to the in-breath, releasing with the out-breath. Some trust, some faith seeps in. Trusting the breath will breathe you in this loving activity. Keeping the body alive. Completely freeing you from the need to make it happen, make it work, make it perfect. Allowing the breath to just be as it is. Flowing in and flowing out. Just sensing and feeling how this kind of empty openness fills with the breath, breathing in, then empties and releases. Just waves of breath ebbing and flowing like the tide, reliably. On and on. This is a safeness you can trust, that you're held in the arms of aliveness. In the embrace of the cosmos. isn't it nice to just kind of surrender to being supported by the breath? It's a kind of, yeah, reverse. It's a loving kindness practice to realize that the breath is here, that it's trustworthy, that yes, it goes through changes, smooth, rough, rapid, shallow, all kinds of changes, but it keeps going as long as we are alive. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, today I want to just go over some of the classic teachings that we're going to be exploring during the next couple of months. And when there's a visiting teacher, they too will be part of this, so it won't feel like the continuity is disrupted in this exploration. And the core basic teachings, the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, as it's called, the first teaching that the Buddha did after his experience of awakening, he went to find the 5 companions that he had been doing practice with before, and they were doing these really almost like cruel, self-mutilating kinds of ascetic practices as a way to try and transcend the body. And the Buddha was so overzealous that he almost died from doing these things. It's said that he got so skinny that in the front of his body you could see his spine. That's how you could see the bones of his spine. That's how emaciated he got. And eventually he just passed out. And it's I think it's not an accident that it was a woman who nurtured him back to strength and health by bringing him, I think it was some rice milk or cow milk. I don't know what it was, but he took it from her and he drank it, and it slowly, regained his strength, and then realized that was not the way to practice. And we've maybe all of us tried some of these things in milder forms, trying to sort of beat ourselves into goodness or submission through various programs that we adopt. And what he discovered was, no, this wasn't the path to solving the problem of suffering in his existence and in the world, that he really needed to find the middle way between self-denial and self-indulgence. And so that's what he did. And when what he saw when he became enlightened, he pulled together into what are called these 4 noble truths classically. Stephen Batchelor likes to call them the 4 tasks, because it's not just some static truth. Each one of them points to a process of engagement with life from a particular perspective that we actively do. And sometimes I've called them the 4 facts of life. And so I'm going to go over those today. But first, I just want to give a shout out to the Buddha for absolutely just a kind of brilliant nesting of the teachings within one another. And what I mean by that is that the 4 noble truths, these classic, I'm just going to use that classic term, that these 4 truths, the 4th one of these truths is the eightfold path. And the eightfold path is the way to embody and understand the 4 noble truths. So they just kind of nest inside of each other. And all the teachings are like this. And it's so brilliant the way that he deconstructed experience and created these lists of qualities and experiences and supports for meditation and hindrances to meditation, because things don't happen in a linear way. They happen all at once, We tend to parse them out in a linear way, maybe because we can only think one thought at a time, and so the mind just sees things in that linear way. But actually, it's all happening in a moment of experience, and part of the mindfulness practice is to be able to see that and to see how it happens. So he found after he woke up, he thought, oh my gosh, I really have to share this with my friends because they're still trying to subdue their bodies by all these arduous practices, sitting in the hot sun. And anyway, I don't need to go into them, but he really wanted to share what he had seen. So he found them in a place that today is called Sarnath, not too far from Varanasi. And he 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 went to a place that's called Deer Park, and there's a big stupa that you can still see if you go visit that place. And you'll see pilgrims walking around that stupa praying, offer their gratitude for these teachings. And there are still deer wandering around there in the deer park. And they keep the grass kind of, they eat the grass, so it looks mowed when you're there. So he went there, and he actually spent the next 45 years of his teaching elaborating on these four truths, and especially the fourth one, which is it's called the Magga, the path, the eightfold path. So Caroline, keep an eye out because people are still coming in. I can see it. Thank you. And it's said that when the Buddha first became enlightened, he didn't want to teach. He didn't have any intention to teach, really, because he in the legend he's asked to teach by gods. Brahma comes and asks him for the welfare of beings. It's a myth, will you teach to please relieve the suffering of others? But he didn't know what to teach because what he had seen was so outside, and it's so against the stream, as he said, of our ordinary experience. It's so different from the way we ordinarily live and see the world that he just didn't feel like there was a way to explain it or that anybody would get it or relate to it. So the good news of that is that he taught us how to do it ourselves. Instead of just expounding, over and over and over what he saw, he taught us how to see. So this was a great solution and a great generosity. In the ancient medicine, old way of formulating medicine, it's not that different actually from today. Things were laid out this way, and the four truths follow this pattern. And the Buddha is sometimes called the doctor or the physician, and we're the patients, right? He's treating our suffering with the medicine that we need to solve it in our lives. And so the first truth is diagnosis. It diagnoses a disease that we have, so to speak, and it's the disease of suffering, of, as Jack often says, being loyal to our suffering, identifying with our suffering. And learning, and sometimes Buddhism gets a sort of bad name for being gloomy or pessimistic because this basic thing is that we're supposed to really know and understand our suffering, but it's just common sense too. I mean, if you don't see what's going on with you, and if you can't see it and be aware of it, that's the first step to being relieved or making a change, right? So the first one is the diagnosis. The second one is the etiology, the cause of this disease, of the suffering that we have. And that second one, it describes it in terms of that loyalty to the suffering, identifying with it, hanging on to it, struggling with it, trying to push it away, trying to get rid of it, trying to ignore it or withdraw and get as far away as you can from it. All these movements of mind and heart that are just plain old reactivity. They don't really solve anything. They're just the ways that we react. And then he says there's a remedy. There's a remedy, and the remedy is, it sounds so simple. The remedy is to just stop doing that. The remedy is that the suffering can cease, that it can end. And sometimes when you read the classical teachings and the sutras, you think, oh, it's going to end once and for all. Excuse me. I'm going to get to a certain place and I'm not going to suffer again. It's going to end once and for all. Well, that hasn't been my experience or the experience of some of the really wonderful teachers that I've had the blessing to study with or be friends with and or live with. And I want to say that my understanding of this suffering ends, that suffering can cease, is that it's more about understanding that we can work with whatever arises, that it's workable, that we can learn how to just let it cease on its own. If we're not struggling with it, it will change. And as you know, from just sitting with and noticing the breath, even just today, if I don't know if Anita and Beth, if you're new to meditation altogether, but even just one sitting, you can see the wild changes that you go through. Everything is like this. It changes, changes, changes. And understanding this with all its poignancy, because it also means that nothing stays, including us, including our lives. Sometimes I teach that being present with the arising, the birth of a breath, how it has its being, and then it ends, and then the next, it sort of vanishes, and then the next breath is born and has its being and ends. And sometimes I talk about how actually we're sitting with the breath, but we're really studying birth and death, the birth and death of experience, which will one day be our own. Well, we've been born, we've done that part, we've lived through that part, but will one day be the cessation or the ending of our own life. So these things can end, and that's a hopeful thing, and I'll talk more about it. And then the fourth truth is the treatment plan. And the treatment plan has 8 steps to it. And the 8 steps are divided into 3 sections: the wisdom section and the ethical living section, and then the meditative practice section. And these are sometimes called the 3 foundations: sila, samadhi, prajna, ethical living, wisdom, and the wisdom that arises from meditation. Excuse me, ethical living, meditation, and the wisdom that arises from meditation. So just very simply, the first 3 truths are the what happens, and the fourth one is how does this happen? And it's a guideline, it's a path that we can follow. And it is really 8 areas of our practice that really touch all the aspects of our life. And even though they're numbered in this sequential way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, as I said earlier, they happen all at once. And we're actually practicing them all at once. It's just, each one of them supports and sort of potentiates the other. And just to name the path right now, just to name the pieces, and we actually have looked at some of them already this year, and they're called right, but I don't, right in this sense, it's a funny translation because we automatically think right and wrong when we hear the word right. But here, right means complete or fulfilling, or Jack originally translated it as wise, which I like a lot. I mean, not just because I like Jack a lot, which I do, but also because I think that works really well. So first there's wise understanding or wise view. And I'm not going to go into each of these because we will spend, at least one Sunday on each one. But this is really, this is the nesting thing again. Wise view is really understanding the 4 Noble Truths, and having insight into the nature of suffering, the cause of it, and the end of it. It's really a path. I mean, it's so wrong. It's so mistaken to think of Buddhism as a gloomy path that focuses on suffering, because it's actually focusing on happiness and pleasure. How can we get pleasure and fulfillment from our life and from who we are? And it's just not usually quite talked about that way, I guess, because I don't know, people associate the word pleasure maybe with desire, and that leads to craving, and that's dangerous. And but actually, this whole path really is about discovering how to enjoy fully this experience of being alive, including how to work with the times that are not enjoyable but are challenging and rough and tough for us. So that's the first one, is that wise view, understanding the Four Noble Truths. The second one we worked with at the beginning of the year, which is wise intention. And that sometimes is translated as wise thought or aspiration, but intention seems simpler to me. And this is basically the intention to embody qualities of awakening in our lives. The intention, and it's called intention rather than a desire or a wish, because again, those words are associated with the ego wanting things, a kind of attachment to things, and this is a kind of intention that isn't the intention to become something or to not become anything. It's just the intention to wake up. And when we set our New Year's intentions, a lot of them had to do with waking up. When people were sharing them, a lot of them had to do with waking up to who you really are, which is often a better person than the one you act like, right? So that, yeah. Then those are the prajna aspect, the wisdom aspect, the wise understanding and the wise intention. And then we have the ethical the ethical parts, and those have to do with the ways that we talk, how we use our speech. Do we use it to promote harmony and understanding and leave people feeling better than we found them? This doesn't mean always being nice and avoiding saying things that might be unpleasant or hard to say. I had the experience yesterday of reading something that a colleague had written, and it contained a word that I found it offensive on behalf of people who don't like having that word used for them. And I debated, should I point it out? Should I say something? Should I not? And then I thought, we're all supposed to be waking up here and learning with each other and learning from each other's confusions, which I think I talked about last week or the week before. So yes, I'm going to tell her. And I did tell her, and it was not very well received. I know she will come back with a better response, and I thought, darn, why did I say anything? That took time, I didn't need to. But actually, in the biggest sense, even though it might not have been that nice for her to hear, we are on a path of waking up. And I know I will hear back from her in a better way when she thinks it over. So I just want to emphasize this part, because you'll find often in spiritual communities and Buddhist centers that people aren't saying the things that need to be said to each other or about each other, sometimes if necessary. And there's a way of pointing things out that is very kind. It came up when we were doing our Costa Rica teaching this past week, where somebody in the group made a microaggression, said something that was hurtful to the African American women in the group. And when it was pointed out to her, oh my gosh, you could just feel her like just sinking. But it was pointed out to her I was able to acknowledge I have had so many public humiliations and shamings from saying the wrong thing, or using a word the wrong way, or using a word that used to be normal, but now it's considered to be disparaging, for good reasons, often, always, I would say. And so just it can be expressed in a way that is not separating or blaming, but is joining and saying we're in this together. We're learning together. And then there's wise action, and that's how we behave, how we act. Just can we act in a way that is based on caring and compassion? Are we acting in ways that are just, completely self-centered and not mindful at all? We can know this. And then the third one in that basket of it's called the sila, the ethical living path. The third one is wise livelihood. And that just means, not selling guns or drugs, having a means of livelihood that doesn't hurt anybody else. That even if it may not be service or something like that, it's at least not breaking our training guidelines of not killing, stealing, lying, misusing each other sexually, using substances, the things like that. And then the last part of the path, this is just an overview that I want to give you today. The last part is the part that's called samadhi, which has to do with our meditation. And the first one of that is called wise effort. And that just means wise effort is just doing the things that are healthy and good for us and letting go of the things that are self-destructive or bad for us. And in meditation, it means finding that balance between too tight, hanging on to the anchor, and too loose. Oh, I'll just let the breath flow and I'll let my mind go wherever it wants, but finding, and wise effort is a constant and ongoing balancing act, really, for your whole practice. So take heart if you are working with this. And yeah, it's just balancing and then trying to straighten up when we get out of balance. And my first teacher, Desan Sanim, used to call it try mind. That was what he called wise effort. Try mind. Fall down 100 times, get up 101 times. That's how he defined wise effort. And then there's wise mindfulness. And too often we see, it's really common these days to see mindfulness taught as just a way of focusing and stabilizing attention. But mindfulness is really big. Mindfulness means mindful of these teachings and how we're living them or not in our lives. Mindfulness is so much bigger than the way that it's commonly taught. And I love that because it really counters all the kind of, picking arguments that anybody starts to have or attack when something becomes mainstream, especially when it starts becoming a lucrative industry. And then the last one is about wise concentration. How are we developing this capacity to be present in a more sustained or active, ongoing way? Is it by squinching up and concentrating really hard? No, that's just going to create tension. It's really bringing all of ourselves to each moment, and then practicing the teachings. So the Buddha spent 45 years walking all around northern India on sharing these kinds of teachings and, speaking to everybody with a story that kind of fit their life circumstances, mostly rural agrarian people. So a lot of the stories are using examples from, say, farming or different trades. And there's been tons and tons of commentaries written on all of these teachings. I don't know, enough to fill countless libraries. But fortunately for us, we don't have to read them all because that's not how we actually learn the teachings. We learn by doing, we learn on the job, we learn by practicing. So, and it can't really be gotten out of books. How many of us have had at different points, Dharma books stacked on our bedside table? That's fine if you need some encouragement, but it cannot replace meditation and mindfulness and practicing the teachings. And the beauty of this, and why I think I agree with you, Clark, it's exciting to come back to the basics for me, because this is a path of exploration and learning that we can walk on our whole lives. I mean, look at me. I'm really, I'm toward the end side of my life, and I can't tell you how grateful I am, even though sometimes it's hard and certainly frustrating, and sometimes we have doubts and we feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so far away from all of this. But even having that thought means awareness, and that you're situating yourself in relation to the path. And it's just normal to have all these doubts and pitfalls. Totally normal. And we just keep at it. And we're encouraged to keep at it. Those of you who've been doing it for years, you know that your life has changed. And if you're just starting out, you know that the day goes just a little bit better on the days that you meditate, right? You know this, and that's what encourages us and keeps us going. And the longer we keep going, the stronger we get. That's a promise. So, yeah, this wasn't like a super poetic teaching, but I really want you to know that you are learning the basics, and that even if you came through the mindfulness door and don't really know much about where the mindfulness teachings are rooted or the rest of the path, that's fine. It's common for people to meditate or practice mindfulness without knowing any of that. But I do think, even though it can be, of course, totally beneficial and helpful, no matter how you do it, that when you know that you're on a path, and you know that all these pieces of the path work together, and that strengthening one piece simultaneously strengthens all the others, when you know this, I think it's encouraging. I think it's inspiring, actually. And I want to quote, this is a quote from Ajahn Sumedho, who practiced for 11 years in the monastery where Jack practiced with Ajahn Chah. Jack was there for 2 or 3 years, 2.5 years, and then practiced in Burma for another half year. And Ajahn Sumedho said, in this eightfold path, the 8 elements work like 8 legs supporting you. This makes me feel like an arachnid, right? A spider. But it is fun to watch their legs working together, right? Watch a spider's legs working. They work together. It's not like 1, 2, 3, as I was saying earlier, in a linear way. It's just that working together. And it's not like you develop wisdom first, and then when you have wisdom, you can develop your ethics, and then when you have your ethics down, then you can develop your samadhi. It's not like that. We think like this, he says. That's how we think, isn't it? You have to have 1, then 2, then 3. As an actual realization, developing the Eightfold Path is an experience in a moment. It's all one. All the parts are working as one strong development. I find that very supportive and very encouraging. And so I'm going to close with a poem. And this is by Naomi Shihab Nye, a Palestinian poet. And it's called Daily. These shriveled seeds we plant, corn kernel, dried bean, poke into loosened soil, cover over with measured fingertips. These t-shirts we fold into perfect white squares. These tortillas we slice and fry to crisp strips, this rich egg scrambled in a gray clay bowl. This bed whose covers I straighten, smoothing edges till blue quilt fits brown blanket, and nothing hangs over. This envelope I address, so the name balances like a cloud in the center of the sky. This page I type and retype. This table I dust till the scarred wood shines. This bundle of clothes I wash and hang and wash again. Like flags we share, a country so close no one needs to name it. These days are nouns. Touch them. The hands are churches. We could say temples. We could say mosques. We could say synagogues. The point is holiness that worships the world. And that's the real spirit of the Eightfold Path. Our ordinary life is transformed. And that's the real spirit of being loved by the breath, acknowledging, receiving, finding our safety in, and ultimately being grateful for this love and tenderness that is aliveness, even when it doesn't feel so good. So thank you, everybody. I talked a bit long this morning, but there is still time for you to offer your reflections, any questions you may have. And yeah, it's your turn. I'm just going to look at the chat because I see.
Right before we get into the chat, I wanted to bring up that we have an event this Wednesday coming on the 19th. I'll put the information for it in the chat. I encourage you to take a look at it. Also, I apologize for the background noise. I'm at my sorority house and it's bid day, so there's a lot of excitement going on around me. But yeah, I'll go ahead and put that information in the chat. I encourage you to look at it. It's kind of a reflection on a retreat. And yeah, it will be taking place this Wednesday.
Well, it's really great that you mentioned that, Caroline. Thank you, because the woman who is doing this event with me on Wednesday evening is a wonderful LGBTQ activist from Uganda who has been so courageous in founding an organization to help. And Caroline's going to post it because I have her name is I have trouble pronouncing her last name properly, which I will learn before Wednesday for sure. But Jack and I were honored to meet her on Saturday, and we aren't seeing anybody, but this was important. So it was, in the sitting outside with masks on, and getting to hear about Claire's courage and the work she does. And every day she risks being imprisoned or jailed, and every day she keeps going. She founded an organization that helps parents of LGBTQ children, or young adults or adults, to understand them, because there is so much prejudice and shame attached to homosexuality and other gender, non-heteronormative gender identifications in that culture, that parents get appalled and terrified. And so anyway, her work is a social justice activist, and she's very down to earth and wonderful and inspiring, and I love her courage, and I hope you'll come on Wednesday evening and meet her. So I see that Deborah has her hand up.
Hi, Trudy. Can you hear me? Okay. Actually, you'll put that in that chat, what you just said, right? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Um, because my son is transitioning, I guess, right now. So
Yeah.
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 So that's really important to me. Thank you. I'm sorry. I guess I just wanted to reach out to the community right now. Thank you for your talk today. It's in a way a little bit guilty asking, but my whole family has COVID right now, and I'm caring for them, and I'm by myself. And so I don't want to sound like a poor pity sympathy, but what you were saying about suffering right now and coming back to this path, it's really just been, I just want to comment that it's really just I'm so grateful for this community. And I keep coming back. And the breath has never been so important to me. I broke my rib too, so it hurts. So I just want to say thank you, everybody. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope everybody gets well soon.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
a
you.
lot to be taken care of. I'm really glad you came this morning.
Yeah. I just want to say I'm really grateful for you and for everybody and for this community. Thank you.
You should check the chat because people are going to send you metta, Deborah. And Heather, I see what you said in the chat, and I really am happy too because I feel like we need to go back to the classical teachings. It's important. And I'm always using them, but not explicitly, so you might not even know it. So, yeah, Robert, you want to unmute?
Hi, good to see you, Trudy.
You too.
It was a very interesting meditation for me where with breath, and what happened over the course of it is that as I was breathing in, I was feeling everyone's breathing in. And as I was breathing out, I was feeling everyone's breathing out. And that's never happened before, where it it wasn't an intellectual awareness, it was just an experience of, oh, right, everyone's breathing. It's not just me. And I don't just mean the Sangha, but I was certainly aware of the Sangha. And um, I just felt very much part of rather than separate from. And that's always an amazing experience for me. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And what you're pointing to is yes, life is breathing. All life is breathing one way or another. Cells are breathing. Creatures are breathing. Spiders are breathing. Not quite sure how, but yeah, thank you, Robert. And breathing during time of COVID has become even more precious because even though they say that Omicron doesn't go into the lungs, I know so many people who have, bad coughs from having this. And so, yeah, it's the breathing is even more precious at this time in the world. Deborah, you still have your hand up, and I don't know if it's because you didn't put it down yet. Okay, good. I just want to be sure you didn't have something else you want to share with us. Yeah. Okay.
I may.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Trudy. I really appreciated your talk, and I was interested in I loved going back to the beginning because I really feel this is something I need to do, and I've been following your teachings on the breath, and I just feel that's where I need to go, where it doesn't become so much of a focus for me, but that I allow it to just be and be with it. And I appreciate that. I'm trying to understand something about being able to, I feel like I need more knowledge about the eightfold path. And though you went through it, and when you went through the Four Noble Truths, and I found myself, even though you said, you can learn all this from experience, don't worry about reading it so much. I still have this feeling that you explained a lot and I got whatever I got, and that's fine. But I still have this feeling like I need to read it and understand it to get it. Like I somehow didn't get it. And should I pick up a book after this or something like that?
Well, sure, you can do that. I mean, I think sometimes when the mind, like the mind needs food for to inspire it for the practice, but this isn't the, I think what I meant to make clear is this was just an overview today, and we're going to be continuing to look at each step of the path and how to practice with it. And so you don't have to understand it all today, and you're never going to understand it all in one day in terms of intellectual understanding, but there's nothing wrong with reading, and I just meant, like, don't try to get it from reading instead of from your own practice as well. Do you see? It wasn't like either or. So if you feel like you want to read more, there's books. There's one by Bhante Gunaratne called The 8 Steps to Happiness that I like. And you could read that. By the way, do you pronounce it Amy or M-A?
Oh, it's pronounced Aimee. Aimee.
M-A, okay. The French way, M-A.
Right, right.
Um, so that's a book you could read, and you can keep coming back as many Sundays as you can, because, we're going to keep learning with this.
Great. That's great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
welcome. And I think the main point is, we don't have to have some kind of extreme spiritual makeover to find peace and happiness here. The emphasis is on working with who we actually are. And sure, we'll change and develop more strength and beautiful qualities of the heart, but that's a byproduct, of the it's a byproduct of the willingness to be with our experience 100% just as it is. And the second truth, the one about understanding suffering, more than understanding suffering, it really means willingness to turn toward that suffering instead of, I talked about all the effort, withdraw, get aggressive, make it go away. But to turn toward that suffering is so counterintuitive. It's so against the stream. It's so, it's kind of like, I don't know if any of you have tried to learn to ski, but it's like if you're downhill skiing or snowboarding. I'll just stick with skiing because I'm not a snowboarder and I don't ski anymore either, but I did. It's so slippery. You're on these slippery things, standing on these slippery things, and it's slippery underneath, and they're going downhill. And just intuitively, what you want to do is lean toward the ground, lean toward the mountain, because that represents stability and groundedness, right? But what happens is when you lean toward trying to get away from that slipperiness or feeling like you're kind of groundless in space, and you lean toward the mountain, your skis slip right out from under you and you fall. Whereas if you can realize that the earth is not the place to lean toward in that situation, even though it feels very solid, you have to lean out into space. You have to make that effort of going toward that which does not feel safe. And that actually helps you be safe and secure and not fall. And I feel like that's something about how the second noble truth works. It's counterintuitive to want to be 100% present with suffering. And yet, that is how we develop the capacity to understand it and to work with it and to move on. It's just like, just when you want to, sort of head for the hills and run away from it, if you can just lean into it and stay with it, things change. I mean, I could just keep talking, you all, but I also try to make room for you.
It's such a weird.
James has his hand up.
Oh, okay. Sorry, James, I didn't see you. Thank you, Clark. Clark is my
So,
assistant today. Thank you. Hi, James.
hey, so I was just writing about how, I was just last night thinking I want to find loving awareness. Like I want to be connected to it more. So then it's just at this point, I recognize it's something I need. But I'm just noticing, I can't believe how present I see you. I can see your level of presence with your engagements here, and it's amazing. Like it is a bit amazing.
Takes one to know one, James.
Thank you.
I read your I read what you put in the chat and I was really happy to read it because this gives you the concrete practical ways to um really to fulfill your aspiration, which is so beautiful.
Cool. There's something kind of interesting. Is though if these four prajna,
Oh,
I
for,
don't
just
think I could pronounce it.
four truths or facts of
The
life.
four truths is uh, Jungian. I can't pronounce words very well. Psychology has, they defined a model that had four elements: king, warrior, magician, lover for the male archetypes. But what's interesting about them is each of these is not an independent thing. The one without the other three suffers in this model. If you have even one missing, there's this total imbalance, and it actually flips to like an upside down pyramid, as opposed to this. If you have all four and all four elements, they are all centering at one point. It seems
That's interesting. I don't have a very geometric mathematical mind, but I can actually understand what you're saying. So thank you.
I just got this little guy. Still,
Oh yeah, I see. Beautiful.
yeah. I've just recently become a little bit interested in some shapes.
That's great. That's great. Angeles Arian, a great Basque teacher of the last century. I think she passed away maybe, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. I'm not sure. Wrote about um, those four paths that you were talking about in a beautiful,
Right.
yeah.
Now, I think it applies to all people, but Jung was heavily focused on the masculine side, and he did define four parts of the female side, but I don't think that it's been explored yet enough. That's like the wise crone is one. I know that. I can't remember right now.
I can't remember either. I have her book, but I can't remember either.
Yes, I've looked at that book,
Like,
Running with the Wolves, or
no, that's Clara Pinkola Estes. That's a different author. This one, her name, I'll tell you her name is Angeles Arien, Arrien. And well, I don't have to tell you, it's of course endemic in our culture that the masculine is more explored than the feminine.
lately, yes, that has been modern history.
Why are we?
So we'll catch up.
Right, right. We will catch up. Thank you. Thank you so much. Um,
Deborah, I'm about to send a link, and I'll Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's meditate together for just a minute as we come to a close of our morning.
And right before that, just a reminder, we'll be having breakout rooms after the meditation. We'll come back probably around 12:35, 12:37 and get those going.
Oh, thank you for that reminder, Caroline. I always encourage everybody, if you possibly can stay after the break, to attend the breakout groups because it's such a good way to get to know each other, but also to explore what may have come up in your practice or in the teachings this morning. So let's sit together for a minute. Wait, James, your hand is still up. Is there more, or did you just, yeah, okay. So at the end of a period of study and practice together, we take a moment to reflect on the goodness of our practice, whatever we've learned or shared, discovered that's been beneficial, whatever's been helpful, whatever we've enjoyed. We just make this kind of imaginative leap of the heart and offer the goodness of our practice to all beings everywhere without exception. It's a natural impulse of generosity to want to share the blessings that we've received in this life. May we and all beings grow in generosity, in kindness, in loving awareness, no matter what is happening in the world around us. This is what we want to embody and express in our lives. I'm saying we, I mean you and me. And it's going to be a little bit different for each one of us, but I trust the good intentions of each one of the enlightened hearts here today, or you wouldn't be here. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for being here today. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you.
And you can unmute yourself, say hi, goodbye.
Thanks, Trudy.
Week.
Have a
Bye,
good weekend,
Trudy.
everybody.
Have a good
Bye.
week.
Thank you. Bye,
Thank you
everybody.
all.
Thank you, Trudy.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Judy.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
And
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
everybody with better